Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video, and we are ending 2023 in Supatease fashion with another tier list. In this one, we will be constructing and formatting it around the 3 versus 3 bracket. It is in this bracket that you can only attain the Gladiator title and associated rewards, and some specializations do better and do worse in this bracket than that of Solo Shuffle. I will also include composition options for these specializations that I feel are the most likely to succeed. So by the end of this video, you're going to have some really good value in terms of what is going to work best for you to go after some of these seasonal end rewards. So let's get started. We've got the Affliction Warlock. Now, Affliction does a lot better in Solo Shuffle than it does in 3v3, and I would have to say that it is likely the weakest of all of the Warlock specializations and likely going to be the most difficult in order to succeed in the 3 versus 3 bracket. Compositions that you would like to aim to play with this are going to be things like Shadow Priest, probably Resto Druid. Resto Druid is just by far the best healer at the moment, so almost any healer can be a Resto Druid, although you might be able to make it work with the Paladin, with Blessing of Freedom and the Blessing of Protections against melee cleaves to help you out in those types of matchups, but it's definitely going to be more of a struggle. I'm putting it kind of middle of the pack. I think a lot of healers can out-heal the type of damage that it does, and there's a lot of high mobility melee DPS like Demon Hunters and Windwalkers that are going to be really difficult for you to deal with in particular, so it's going to be more of a rough ride. Not impossible, but more of a rough ride. Arcane Mage is actually a phenomenal specialization. I'm putting this up onto the S tier. Now, Arcane is a little bit more comp dependent, although it does have some flexibility. I've seen a lot of variety, but I would have to recommend, obviously, Rogue Mage, probably Druid, but you can play with Priest, or Feral Arcane can be a decent substitute composition, as I have seen that, although most of those have been running with Priest, but it's not going to compare to Rogue Mage. Rogue Mage is definitely going to be your best option. When it comes to like double caster, you probably want to play Frost, so with Arcane, I think it's better to focus on playing with a melee DPS. I think it's ideal. Subtlety Rogue, Outlaw Rogue, Feral Druid can be like a decent substitute filler for that, and Windwalker Monk can also be pretty decent, but Arcane is going to require a little bit more knowledge and strategy towards those compositions to see the level of success of the tier that I'm putting it on. It's not going to be as easy to climb on for somebody who's just jumping into Arena, but the top end potential of it is definitely there. Arms Warrior, now this one is a little bit more simple. I think Arms Warrior is definitely really strong, but you can get kited out by a lot of the top tier specializations, which makes it difficult to be able to close out matches, is what I'm noticing more regularly with it. Now, Arms Warrior has a lot of flexibility, and you can play a lot of compositions. Now, the best one that I think is going to get the most rating the easiest is either going to be with a Ret Paladin, again, a Resto Druid, but you can play with a Mistweaver Monk. You play with almost any healer as that composition, probably not double Paladin, or you can actually run with Death Knights. I've seen quite a lot more of this popping up, both Frost and Unholy with Warrior, a lot more frequently. I'm going to put it here onto the A tier for right now. Again, I think the main reason is that a lot of the other high mobility melee can actually stick to the best specs in the game, which you'll have a harder time on Arms. I think you can get kited out in a lot of situations, but your pressure and your cooldown reduction still makes you a really viable option when it comes to 3v3. Assassination Rogue doesn't really get a lot of attention because Subtlety Rogue is just so insanely good, and Outlaw Rogue is just edging a little bit beneath that. But Assassination Rogue isn't completely awful. It's not it's not amazing, but it's not completely awful. Again, you're just directly competing with Outlaw and Sub in the same comps. So it's really tough. You're probably not going to feel like you have a spot because you can't compete in those comps with them. But where you can try to compete is with things like Shadow Priest or with an Affliction Lock, I think. Although, Arcane Assassination or Fire Assassination is probably your best option. Finding a group for that doesn't want you to be Sub or Outlaw is going to be a lot harder. It's going to be easier to play Assassination as well than Subtlety or Outlaw, though, so take that into account. If you're more new to Rogue, it might be easier to actually play Assassination, but finding a group will be tough. I'm going to put it here on B+. I think similar to Arms, it's got mobility problems, a little bit more survivability issues, but its damage is definitely still really high and can actually be a really fun spec, especially if you pair it with something like an Affliction Lock or a Shadow Priest. But again, those are going to be some struggle compositions, especially as you get towards the top end of the ladder. So yeah, take that into account. Balanced Druid. Now, I actually think Balanced Druid is an S tier specialization. Like, you have a lot of comps at the moment. You can play Ellie Balanced Druid, you can play Destro Balanced Druid, Demo Balanced Druid, and you can play Demon Hunter Balanced Druid, and you can play Rogue Balanced Druid. Like, you have a ton of options with this. Your weakness comes in against Rogue Mage, particularly. A lot of the Boomkin comps are really susceptible to Rogue Mage and struggle with it. So if you can avoid that, you're going to be in a really good spot. Mostly the Subtlety Rogue versions are definitely going to be a bit of a struggle, but if you're willing to commit to this, it's got a lot of options. I'm really enjoying my time on it. It's going to be really strong in this bracket. Beast Mastery Hunter is really good at the moment. It has a lot of options. I would say that like Ret Hunter, either Resto Druid or Priest, is probably your best and easiest option. But I've been actually playing even Jungle, which isn't, the most amazing comp, and we've been peaking over 2,400. So you have options as this spec. You just do an almost unhealable amount of damage. Death Knight BM Hunter can be great to deal with the influx of mages and even balanced druid teams as well. So for me, Beast Mastery Hunter, I'm kind of putting it on A+. I think your weak points come into, getting blasted down by rogues. You're a lot more susceptible to that than a lot of the specs that are on the S tier. Mostly it's defense, but it's still a really good option for 3v3. Blood Death Knight, don't do it to people, man. Don't do it. There are some people who try and make the tanks work. Blood DK might be actually one of the best ones to do it, but it's going to be a rough ride. Same thing goes for Brewmaster. Demonology Warlock, this is a hard one for me as to whether or not I want to say it's S or A, because I think that Demonology actually does really well into things like Subtlety Rogue, but it does have problems. Are the problems enough to bring it down a rank? Like your best comps are going to be things like Elemental Shaman, Demonology Warlock, Resto Druid, or Balanced Druid, Demonology Warlock, Resto Shaman, or even Resto Druid. Again, Resto Druid is just so good at the moment. I'm going to put it up onto S tier for now because I definitely think it has really strong capabilities of just absolutely destroying, and having mortal wounds for its combinations with casters makes it really desirable. It's definitely a really strong contender. Destruction Warlock. This is another one that's amazing, mostly because of the 4-set bonus with the rifts. As you're resetting these rifts, you're just doing like an unfathomable amount of damage off the back of them. You're really good with casters and rogues, so you get a lot of flexibility. I'd say that you're maybe a little bit squishier than Demonology, but you have multiple schools of magic that are a bit easier to manage as well. I'm putting it up onto S tier, I think. I think that it is definitely still a really good pick. Devastation Evoker, you are going to struggle with rogues. Rogue in particular, you're just going to feel completely useless. So depending on what your bracket looks like or your queues look like, you could have a really terrible night or a really good night. You do really well into double melee DPS, which there are quite a lot at the middle range of the ladder. So, just below Gladiator at the moment, but as inflation kicks in, it might get a bit better for you. It's got its one-shot combo. I feel like you've probably only got like one really viable comp, which is Death Knight, probably Frost or Unholy, but I would say leaning towards Frost is going to be better to lean into the cheese factor of your spec. And then you can play with like a Priest who buffs you with Power Infusion and Dark Archangel, and you try and go for these one-shot all-ins. It's the same type of build that you've had since the start of the expansion. And then you do the one-shot, run away, similar to how like the old-school Windwalker DK used to play. So I'm going to put it like here in the middle. I think the cheese comps are definitely good, but they're probably only going to get you so far. So take that into account. Discipline Priest, I actually think is really good. I think, again, in Rogue Mage, it's competing directly with Druid, so it's not going to, directly compete for that spot in a lot of cases, but you can flex it in on the Hunter comps, flex it in on the Rogue Mage comps. You could probably even use it on some of the Wizard comps, although I wouldn't recommend it. So definitely stick around Rogue Mage, Rogue Boomkin, Hunter Rets, Hunter Feral. These types of compositions are going to be where you want to go as a healer for this. I'm going to put it up here on A tier for now, because I do think it is actually really good overall. Elemental Shaman. Now, you're really good into melee DPS, especially if you know how to use your knockback talents and your Unleash Shield and your instant Frost Shock roots. You can definitely make it really annoying for melee DPS, but you're going to struggle with high mobility, things like Subtlety Rogue. In Caster Mirrors, you do pretty well as well. You have decent off healing. I feel like you're just a little bit lower, though. I want to say that you're kind of like more here as opposed to S tier, mostly because of defense. And you've got some comp options. I've seen Windwalker Ellie, I've seen Demo Ellie, probably the most common, and Boomkin Ellie are the most common, or maybe a little bit of Destro Ellie. Like these caster comps tend to be where it goes, but you can actually run Warrior. It's got some options. It's definitely high up here. I'm just bringing it a little bit lower than S. I think it does struggle with the rogue teams more than the options that are currently up there. But it's oddly enough, it's the one that's coupled with most of the ones that are up there. Enhancement Shaman. This one's kind of a sleeper spec. It can be good, it can be bad. I think Windwalker Enhance and Warrior Enhance probably are your best options at the moment. But you're going to get kited out by a lot of these mage teams. You're doing a lot better with the Lava Lash build, I would say, than in the previous patch. So your win conditions are a little bit more solid than just praying for a proc. Where do we want to put this though? I want to say it's probably like B plus at the moment, maybe A, maybe like a low A, high B plus. So like somewhere here, because I do think that those comps are good, but you get like hard countered. There's hard countered situations, and you can get kited out way harder than almost like any other melee DPS in the game, and a lot of these classes will do that to you. Feral Druid, this is a tough one to rank because again, you struggle with Rogue Mage. You're one of the squishiest melee. You're going to be the target in most matchups. Compositions I've seen for this again are BM Hunter and Priest, or Arcane Mage and Priest. Those are the most common compositions that I see on 3v3 if you're looking for one for Feral Druid. I want to say it's got to be doing a little better than Enhance, but not by much. So just a little bit on the lower end of the A. At the moment, seems good to me. Again, Spam Clone is really nice on this spec. It's mostly defense. If it was tankier, it would just immediately jump up to S. It would be absolutely insane. But tankiness is the main problem for you. Fire Mage, similar thing. Your tankiness, but because you're in ranked 3s, you're coordinated on comms. You can coordinate around your squishiness, kite around the map. Rogue Mage is going to be your main staple comp as fire. Subtlety Fire, probably like Resto Druid or Disc Priest are going to be, or even Holy Paladin are likely going to be some of your best options. I think you're probably a little bit weaker than Arcane just because when I'm watching, tournament level teams practicing, they're all opting for Arcane for the most part over Fire. And I think it's because of defense. So for me, I'm putting Fire Mage here on the A+, although within the realm of Rogue Mage, it's probably like one of the best comps in the game, so take that into account. But I do see people opting for Arcane over Fire in a lot of cases. Frost is going to be your best wizard comp. So if you like playing double caster, Frost is going to be your best. You can play Frost Emo, Frost Destro. You can play even probably Frost Devastation. You can play like any combination double caster, even Frost Affliction. It probably do decently well. You're really good into melee DPS. You can get trained down though by like Demon Hunter comps. Like Demon Hunter Boomkin is really tough for Frost Mage in particular. I want to say Frost Mage is probably like here, like A+, like really close next to Fire, under or equal to Fire basically. Maybe we'll move BM Hunter up a little bit over this. It's really tough. These are all really close to each other, honestly, in the A tier. Frost DK, I think, is way better than it is in Shuffle. Although, how am I going to represent that on this? I think particularly things like Devastation Evoker Frost or Arms Warrior Frost DK or even Windwalker or even Demon Hunter Frost DK are actually really good in this bracket, and you can coordinate setting up your AoE CC and going for massive burst swings, but it's kind of cheesy. This is very similar to the Devastation Evoker, so maybe we'll put it here. In the middle. I don't know, man. I swear it's better than that. I swear I see it so frequently now that it's got to be better than that in 3s. You definitely have an easier ride in 3s than you are in Shuffle, so if you're looking to go after like Transmogs and stuff, I would have to recommend that for you as Frost. Fury, on the other hand, I don't see doing, I don't see a lot of it. I feel like it's not bad, but it's not like stellar. There's nothing about it that's just like, wow, everybody's now re-rolling to this is the main problem. I see everybody's opting for Arms. It's probably just because Arms is so good at the moment and its force piece is so fun. Fury Warrior, it's probably similar to Affliction Lock, honestly, where you're going to get kited out by a lot of these top level casters. Difficult to maintain uptime. I feel like if it was a Shadow Priest meta or something, then Fury would be a lot better, but it's not. I think you just feel like you get kited out in a lot of situations from my personal experience, and Arms is just a better lock-in in most matchups anyways, so it's kind of tough to get that spot over Arms. Guardian Druid, we're not going here. Havoc Demon Hunter I want to put on S, but now I'm feeling like I'm going to need to do like a separate tier from S to A or something because I think like we need to separate where another row is. So we're adding a row here mid tier list. Okay, we're adding God. Okay, we got to have God because there needs to be a delineation, I think, here. So Demon Hunter, I think, is definitely S tier still. Demon Hunter Death Knight, insanely powerful comp. Demon Hunter Boomkin, insanely powerful comp. But you're going to struggle to one specialization, and if you haven't figured out what it is throughout this video so far, you're going to know pretty soon when we get to it. Holy Priest, I don't see a reason why you would want to be holy over any healer right now. You have worse mana, worse survivability, just you got worse damage. You've got a ranged stun, which can be okay in double caster, but druids can also stun, so not really that great. Even shaman can stun. I can't in good faith recommend Holy Priest, but if you really wanted to make it work again, you're probably going to play Rogue Mage, fire sub, and you're going to just be fighting for the priests and the druids that want to heal them in terms of that slot, but it's probably going to be your best comp. If you're just playing for fun, you can play a lot of different things like double caster, but I think it's going to be more of a struggle than other healers for sure, which is why it's down here. Holy Paladin, Definitely not bad. I'm actually putting it a little higher than Disc Priest. I see Holy Paladin, Ellie Shaman X. I see this a lot, whether it's Enhance or Ellie and then like a Warrior or another third on top of that. That's a very common archetype that I'm seeing on 3v3 that's doing really well at the moment for Holy Paladin. It just has a lot of purge protection now with its new 2-piece that I think is increasing its viability, so its bops aren't just immediately stripped away, so it can help out classes like Ellie's a lot more reliably, and it's doing actually a lot better than I was really expecting. I think Holy Paladin is really good in this bracket. Marksmanship Hunter, you're a mage counter, but even that, like, BM is probably still better. I want to put you down here. Like, you got decent one-shot damage, but if you're not getting these mage mashups, I feel like Marksman's going to feel just really weak compared to BM Hunter. Again, Ret Hunter, probably one of your best options in terms of comp. I would say maybe stick to Ret Hunter only because he's going to be your best bursty melee DPS over other options for marksmanship. For Mistweaver Monk, Mistweaver not doing as good anymore. I don't see a lot of it anymore. It's kind of like falling off pretty hard. I'm wondering if you can still play Fistweaver with like a Frost DK Demon Hunter. You probably get countered by the double casters though, and Rogue Mage is going to be really tough, and those are the things that you just struggle with in general. So for me, Mistweaver is probably like falling off a little bit. You're not going to compete with Resto Druid at the stationary game, and I don't know if you'll compete with like Disc at the damage portion of the game, unfortunately, at the moment. But you would heal all of the same types of comps. You can heal Ellie Boomkin, you can heal the Cleaves. You're still a really solid overall healer, which is why I'm putting on the A tier. But the other ones above you are going to have it just a little bit easier. Outlaw Rogue, we've been talking about this. Outlaw Arcane, insane composition, probably one of the best in the game, if not the best in the game. So I kind of want to put like Outlaw up here. I'm going to put it up here for now for 3v3. Outlaw Rogue, Arcane, Resto Druid is just one of the best comps. I think there's only one other comp that could compete with it, and it's another Rogue specialization. Outlaw is absolutely phenomenal spec at the moment for 3v3, but it's not as easy, right? If you want to play a Ret Warrior, you're gonna have a way easier time as Ret Warrior, but if you're willing to commit to the composition, you're just going to be completely unbeatable, I think, to every other option. Preservation Evoker, not that great. You're susceptible to Root Beam. Boomkins are popular. You're really weak to Subtlety Rogues. Putting you on B+. I think you're probably going to have a bit of a struggle. And you do have decent damage. I've seen like Boomkin Rogue Preservation Evoker is kind of one of the most common Preservation Evoker comps. I think you could play Ellie Boomkin as well, but you're going to notice the weaknesses in those matchups to things like Subtlety Rogue for sure, where you're either crowd controlled out or just dead. And it's because you have to play so close to the game, and those classes are just so lethal towards you. Prot Warrior, we're not talking about it. Prot Paladin, we're not talking about it. Resto Shaman. Resto Shaman, you're better than Pres Evoker. I want to say that you're like actually not like you're competing with the other healers. I'm putting you on the top of the A at the moment. I think that when you can coordinate around your Earthenwall Totem and your cooldowns are actually really good. I think Boomkin, Demon Hunter, Resto Shaman is a really good comp. Although I see you subbed out for Resto Druids in a lot of cases, which is why like you're A, but it's going to be tough to compete with Druids. So those are the comps you can run. I think it's actually not that bad in 3v3. Resto Druid, God tier healer, just insane throughput. The new Elder Druid honor talent that activates Heart of the Wild and reduces your Cyclone cast speed is making Cyclone like practically instant cast. And while that Heart of the Wild is up, you're basically unkillable in Bear. And you're like permanently in Tree of Life while summoning these treants that heal everybody for you. It's just absolutely crazy. I do wonder if we're going to see more PvP changes moving forward. Obviously, the tournaments are coming in at the end of the month, so there's still some time before that period of time, but Resto Druid is clearly, bounds ahead of every other healer, I think, at the moment. Retribution Paladin, this is a tough fit. I think, it's got some of the more basic compositions like Ret Warrior and Ret Hunter that can still do really well in the ladder, and they're going to play a lot more simply than a lot of these other compositions, but you can get kited out. And getting kited out is going to be a really big problem with the classes that are up here. So I'm putting you on A along with Warrior. But these would be easier comps to climb. But when you're talking like peak potential, I think these specs have more peak potential. But easier comps, still one of the best basic comps to try and climb on the ladder for Gladiator. Shadow Priest. This is a really tough one. I see it, but it doesn't really do well. It's doing decent damage most of the time when I'm seeing it. Like it's actually coming close to topping the scoreboard or topping the scoreboard. But it's not particularly threatening. Now, I'm sure that like there's gonna be tournament teams that still play things like Rogue Shadow Priest, but on the ladder, again, I'm seeing like Shadow Priest Demo is probably your best comp at the moment. Where do we want to put this? It's probably, I want to say it's like A, somewhere on the A tier. It's still a solid spec overall. It's not going to feel as cheesy or countered or gimmicked by the specs that are in the B+, but you just don't have any like little bit of an extra edge, I think, over these other specs. With MD being such a long cooldown now, that was maybe something that gave you a little bit more of an edge that had put you higher, but you just don't have that edge anymore. Subtlety Rogue, God tier. Now you might be thinking, well, I'll just play Outlaw sub Resto Druid, right? I mean, maybe that's good, but I'm kind of doubting it. It's basically Subtlety is the best spec in the game. Outlaw is just, you know, in its shadow, just a little bit lower than it, I think, from players that have asked about this. Resto Druid clearly up here, but like, you know, Subtlety Boomkin, Subtlety Arcane, Subtlety Destro. You can play like those types of compositions with those casters and do really well. I'm even honestly seeing people do like Subtlety on Holy DK last night, and they're playing like the highest level of the ladder. So Subtlety Rogue is by far the best spec in the game, and it's mostly due to its defense. Although you might be saying, well, it's because it one-shots people, but it's actually its defense. Used in the hands of a player that understands Vanish and the cooldown reduction associated with it, you can make yourself just impenetrable to death, and that is the main thing that makes it so powerful. Outlaw Rogue is very similar, but I would say Outlaw's offensive edge is a bit weaker than Subtlety, although maybe, you know, easier to play overall. You can play a little bit more of a damp play style, whereas Subtlety, you've got to be setting up these goes. So a little bit more complexity towards Subtlety than Outlaw, but they both work at the highest level. Survival Hunter is definitely better than Marksman, but I don't think it's better than BM. So I think putting it like B tier is probably a better spot. Same compositions, Ret Hunter, Feral Hunter, same type of deal. Survival can play a little bit more cheeky stuff. Like I've seen Shadow Priest Survival Hunter work, and sometimes Warlock Hunter work a couple times, but it's going to be more of a struggle than Beast Mastery for sure. So I'm coming here on the A tier. Unholy DK, I'm actually putting this pretty high, and this might come as a surprise, but I think it's an S tier class. I think Demon Hunter Death Knight is one of the best comps in the game. Demon Hunter Rogue is now apparently going to be one of the best comps in the game. You can play Death Knight, Demo Warlock. There's a lot of different combinations for it. It's in a really good spot. It does a tremendous amount of damage. Festering Wound pops, and Death Quills are hitting really hard. I think it's in a really good spot. You can Chains of Ice and Kite in a lot of these rougher situations. And these guys are kind of being held down to the food chain due to the popularity of these specs. So you get a chance to come in against these ones. And you can play with, even with a Hunter, I've seen it. It's doing actually really well. Vengeance Demon Hunter, we're not talking about it. Windwalker Monk, another one that I think is definitely S tier. It's a very similar role to the Subtlety Rogue, and you are almost as durable, but I would say not as durable. But you are almost as durable, which is one of the main reasons that you're coming in on this top side. You're just doing a ridiculous amount of damage. I don't know what happened to Blackout Kick, but Blackout Kick, when you combo it together, is just doing like 500,000 damage. It's just the amount of damage that you're doing. This is actually mind blowing. It is insanely powerful. But I'd say it's still a tier below what Rogue is currently at. Maybe you're higher than Demon Hunter though. I don't know. Windwalker's a tough one. I'm gonna put it in the middle for now. Augmentation Evoker, I feel like you're just a worse Devastation Evoker. You don't one shot as hard on the one shot combo. Sustain in between is kind of lackluster. You're not fantastic. Augmentation Evoker is going to be, I think, more of a struggle this season when it comes to 3v3 for sure. And that's my thoughts here for the tier list. Remember, some of these are going to be more difficult to climb just due to their complexity, but if you're committed to that complexity and learning and mastery, you're going to perform way better than every other option. And I've given some options in the middle if you skip past this video that are going to be a little bit simpler. So I definitely would say recommend watching the whole video to understand why the classes are ranked as they are. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and you got something valuable out of it. If you did, make sure to thumbs up, comment down below with your thoughts, and hit the subscribe button. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.